Hi, Laser Dad again. This week, I guess I'm going to be doing exhaust stuff. So the exhaust that I'm putting on is 3-inch stainless. I got it from Front Wheel Drive Performance. I know Turbos Unleashed sells it too. I don't know if anybody else does. It's similar to what I had on the last car. Well, on this car the last time. This is a brand new exhaust. My other one will be going on the Daytona because it's not in as nice a shape as this is. This is the downpipe. So we welded these clamps on for the cat pipe, and I decided to mount the flex pipe as close to the cat as I can. My thinking is that I don't know if I'm going to mount it this way or this way. We'll have to see. Either way, it's set up to do it. That's my thinking anyways on it. Now this has the 3-inch swing valve and the exhaust manifold. So it uses the exhaust donut that goes on the end. Another design change that I've done is this was the downpipe coming off the exhaust manifold. I'm using Turbo Unleashed's exhaust manifold that has the turbo put more towards the driver's side. And this stock, the original I should say, 3-inch pipe, had a dog leg down here at the bottom. I think it went that direction to get the muffler and catalytic converter in the right position. So what I was able to do, because I have the flex joint coupler on this setup, I was able to cut that dogleg section off and shorten the downpipe. So that makes up for most of this catalytic converter and flex joint. So now this will move more forward. My only dilemma is, do I run the cat this way or this way? And I kind of think the flex joint would be good to have in the front, because when the engine torques back and forth, you're more likely to get the benefit of the flex joint. The rear is not going to move very much. But I know it is nice to have the cat towards the front, because the closer it is to the exhaust, the more it's going to do, but I don't really care about that, to be honest. And the other reason for having the flex joint to the front is that it's not going to get the heat from the catalytic converter blowing into it, because you know these cats are going to get hot. So by having it ahead of the cat, it'll still be the same temperature as the downpipe, but it won't be the temperature of what's coming out the back. So I think I'm going to run it this direction. There's enough room in there to do it. Just gets this away from the foot area too, and pushes it more towards our hips. I decided that I'm going to put exhaust wrap on the downpipe, and to do that I'm going to use safety wire to hold it in place. Never used safety wire before. It's kind of hard to figure out on your own, but once you see it done, it's pretty easy. Just go on YouTube. Adam Savage from Mythbusters has a great YouTube video on how to do it. Now, if I were going to do a long tail, it would be a little bit different than this. But these are a small pair of pliers. They come in different sizes. They have a wire cutter on them. They've got this lock. So when you put the wire, both wires in there, and bring it down, you push the lock in and that little slide comes up, and then you just pull on this end piece and that spins the pliers. I just need to hold the end of this wrap on. So I don't need a whole lot of wire. So you have to hold on to the end of the pliers and let go of the spinner, and then pull up on the spinner while you let go of the pliers. I'm using the wrong wire as part of my problem. I actually make safety wire. I'm just using some plain old wire that I had laying around. So that should be enough to hold it in place. Not the best job, but it's my first time ever using it. So this is another roll of safety wire that I got from Harbor Freight. We'll see if that works better than the last stuff. It actually feels stronger. The other wire I had was more brittle. I actually feel this is more, I don't know how to describe it, like a nickel wire. I already feel that it's harder to cut. You cut through it, but it doesn't snap off like the other one did. You kind of have to wiggle it to break it off. So I assume that means it's more ductile and it'll hold it, not snap so easy when you're working with it. So the first step I was already starting to screw it up was don't twist it. Put it in the jaws. Make sure it's clamped. Slide the lock up. Actually, I'm going to pull from the side. Hold the plier, let go of the end. this works much better. To secure the downpipe exhaust manifold, as I said earlier, this is the Turbos Unleashed exhaust manifold. I bought these bolts. They have the long shoulder on that's supposed to come up through and then stop against the exhaust manifold so that you have, I should actually put the spring on. Like that, and then you get the nuts that go on. I don't like the nuts. I drill my exhaust manifold out so that the hole is straight through if it's got threads in it, and that way if these ever rust, being an exhaust bolt, they're prone to do that, even though I have never sees on them. If that rusts, you'll never get the bolt out. It'll be a nightmare. So what I do, if you use this type of a bolt with a shoulder on it, it will keep you from putting too much spring pressure on. But the problem is if you ever can't get this bolt out for some reason, it's really tough to cut a hardened bolt that's that thick. So what I always use is a hardened Allen bolt, and then put a washer on it obviously, but that comes up through into the exhaust manifold. And then I've got the welded tabs on the 8mm nut. And another thing to note is the passenger side, there's plenty of room above the exhaust manifold to get this in, but on the driver's side you're going to have to thin it down as narrow as you can get it, because when that goes up in there, there's hardly any room for this to go. Even if you put just a nut on there, trying to get a wrench in with a nut is a nightmare. So this setup works good, but you have to make it very narrow and then weld up on both ends of the nut. So that's how I do it. And I think I one time had to cut one of the bolts off to get it out of there, so it definitely paid off not using the shouldered bolt. This is the aluminum heat shield that is right next to the downpipe for the exhaust coming out of the engine. As you can see, mine got burned away a few years ago in the fire, so I needed to replace it. Not the best heat shields anyway, they're just a small thin layer of aluminum. So I went to the junkyard and came up with a Dodge Caravan. This is a 2015 Caravan. From what I can see, there's a lot of years that are probably going to be the same, but it's made out of more of a fiber material. This probably has a thin layer of aluminum foil and then some kind of heat shield material. So this is there, real easy to pull out. I'll show how to do that. And it's got a bunch of these clips that are just push-in clips. So you have a stud coming out of the lower body, and they just push onto it. They're just 6mm studs. I think they're just bolts actually that are bolted through from the inside with a nut on the outside, and then these push up onto the bolt. At least that's how I plan to do it. So nothing fancy. And it took me 5 minutes to pull the shield out. So this is from the transmission tunnel of a Buick. I'll list the exact model and year, but it came in a box as one piece, and I figure I can get 2 of those pans out of it. So there's enough material there easily to make at least one, if not 2. So I think that's the route I'm going to go rather than the Caravan heat shield. The Caravan will probably work, but it's just so big it's tough to work with. This is more in tune with what was originally there. Longer than the original. Put a little more tail on it. But I think it'll work well. Definitely better than that burned up one. One of the things that I have a pet peeve about is that on the bottom of the car I don't like to have any bolts protruding down that can catch on things. I've hit my head on so many bolts under cars over the years, it just ticks me off. So what I normally do is cut them flush with a nut once I get everything up and mounted. But then the next time you go to mount something, you're going through the same problem over again. And that you got to try to get the pan pushed back far enough that you can get a nut on there, and it's kind of a pain. So what I'm going to do is take the bolts out and put in the rib nuts, so that you're putting a bolt into the bottom of the pan, into the bottom of the floor, and then you'd only have the head of the bolt sticking out. Now granted, on the inside of the car you're going to have a protrusion, but if you size the length of the bolts correctly, you don't have much protrusion, and you come out with a clean look on the outside, and you're not dealing with a nut on the inside that you got to have somebody inside to hold the wrench for you. So that's my philosophy, and so I'll be converting these bolts off. The one in the back I've already cut. I've got these two are cut off, so I'll have to go inside and pull them out and then put my rib nuts in here, and then I can start laying my aluminum panel in. The emergency brakes, make sure you get those in before you put the pan in. So on the driver's side, this has the floor mounted pedal, and you've got this slip joint over the top is where one of the cables has to go to keep it from pushing down on the pan, and then the passenger side has the adjuster on it that goes up into the frame, and both these go back to the cables that come off the rear wheels. One of the things, this has the Turbo Unleashed custom exhaust manifold and 3-inch swing valve setup. The one thing I want to caution you is some manifolds come with threads that your bolts will go up into. If you do have threads, I highly encourage you to drill them out so that you have to put a nut on. I say that because I have had a manifold before where the second pipe threads into it, and when you break a bolt you've got to drill it out and tap it, and that usually means pulling the manifold out of the car, and it's just a nightmare. So if you have just a straight through hole in this and you have to cut the bolt, you can cut it. It's not going to be easy to do probably, but at least you can cut it with a Dremel tool or something small that you can get up in here, and then at that point it's easy to just take apart. So if you have a threaded manifold, highly encourage you to drill it out and just put a straight bolt through it with a nut. One of the things I forgot to cover in the last video was the drain back valve or hose for the turbo oil drain back. I had taken this fitting off and spun the oil pump to make sure that I had a decent flow of oil coming out of this fitting. So that's one of the important things to do. If you're spinning your pump and you don't have oil flow through here, your turbo is going to burn out on you pretty quick. So just keep that in mind, that you want to do that before you get in here and things start getting cramped. Now in this case, the transmission cable is in, so that gave me some frustration trying to get at it. If I put oil in it when it was on the stand and spun it then, actually I did do that at one point, but if I had checked it then, it would have been a lot easier to verify that I do have oil flowing through. So that's just another tip to save you some hassle. If I'd pulled the starter, I could have got the bolt that's on the block, the nut on the block I should say, but either one's very inconvenient to get at once you've got everything installed. So if there's any way you can do it before you start installing parts, I highly encourage it. Since the wiring in the airbox is going to be covered up pretty quickly, I thought I would show the mess that's in here. I've got my Smec that I've taken half the cover off, removed the excess. I should probably paint this gray area black, kind of blend it in a little bit. And then I've got all the wiring harnesses that are laying in here. Now granted, the air filter sits in here like that, so that covers up most of what's there. And I've also got this braided mat stuff. I'll probably get a bigger piece of it, but that'll work well to stick in underneath and hide some of the wiring. I can't really tape the wires up to the very end because it gets a little thick up in here, so I'm going to just cover that up, and then the airbox cover comes on. But you can see there's a lot of wiring going on in here. This wire harness comes over from the starter and the speed sensor, distance sensor, and comes in, and then I've got a mass of wires here that come in from the alternator and the front of the engine. So that's what these 4 harnesses are. Also the battery cables coming in from the rear. I put the braided sheathing around that so you don't see a red battery cable come in. So everything mounts there on the positive post and up here on the negative post. Once I get the air cleaner in, of course I can't get to this, but it's pretty easy to take the air cleaner out. It's just one hose clamp up here and it pops right out. The nice thing I like is my power distribution center, PDC. It's now populated with fuses and relays. I don't need these relays. The only time I would need them is if I want to add anything external to drive outside the PDC. So that's what these extra wires are for. So I can just add a relay, connect into the wires, and to remove the PDC, there's a clip here. I just have to pull the clip. And of course I have to untape this red connector, pull that, but it'll all just slide right out of here. I can also unbolt it. There's 2 bolts that hold it on from the back, so either method would work. If I wanted to do the 2-bolt method, I could leave the bracket in place. Of course, now I got to get it back in place, which is harder to do. Now it's back in place. As you can see, that airbox cover conceals a lot of this wiring that looks pretty bad. If there weren't so many connectors, it would be a lot easier, but when you modify things, you can't always come up the way you want to do it. This is the side cover for my airbox, and it's made out of aluminum. I was going to get it done with ABS, and they were going to charge me $150, mostly because they had to get the ABS material. So when I did it out of aluminum again, like I normally have been doing. But the one thing I didn't like about it was every time I install it and take it out, I end up nicking the paint. So I was going to get it powder coated, and unfortunately my powder coater's shop burned down a month ago. So he's not able to do as much volume as he was before out of another shop. So everything's working against me. So I fortunately kind of know guys who do the water jet cutting, and I asked him about why was it so expensive on the, and he told me because they probably quoted buying a new piece of plastic, and I was paying for the whole 4x8 sheet of plastic. So anyways, he says, I've got a scrap laying around somewhere. So he hunted up a scrap, and I was able to get it for 50 bucks. So it's same dimensions as this, same holes cut, and it's only 50 bucks. So this one will go in this car, and the aluminum one will go in the Daytona. So it's nice having two cars that you can swap parts for. And kind of design for one car and use them on the other one as well. So things are working out. I'm sure most of you have seen these magic creepers. I love working on using this to work on the car. I've got 3 creepers, and every time I try to work under the car, things are always getting jammed under the wheels, going over a cord, a screw, a bolt, anything that gets in the way is just a pain. And I find that it slides so easy that it just makes it nice to work on the car. I can slide myself back and forth under here almost effortlessly, where if I don't use the creeper, I just use cardboard. I'm dragging myself across the cardboard, and of course you got to come in and out half a dozen times to do one project. So I find that this thing is great. I think they're about 60-70 bucks. So just something that I'm recommending if you have to get under a tight space under your vehicle. Working under my truck, it works great. I rarely ever use a normal creeper anymore because they're so nice. So just my 2 cents.